Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the VSI Sporting Directors podcast with our friends here at Omni Sports. I'm delighted to welcome our latest guest. He's someone I've known for more than 20 years. He's a director with Hudl, but started his journey at Bolton Wanderers and then took in Manchester City before switching to Hudl. Ed Sulley, lovely to meet you, lovely to see you. It's been such a long time. We've been through an awful lot. When I look through your journey, there are loads of themes that kind of link everything together. Good people, data, game model, and joining organisations at the right time and an exciting time. We have a lot of people sat in that chair who say things like, I just got my timing right, I was lucky. You've got your timing right 3 times in a row. It's more than luck, it's humility, and I think that's been borne out for the podcast that we've had. But I mean, in terms of a game model, I want to take you all the way back to Bolton Wanderers before game model was even a phrase. But they were the people who kind of built that whole idea that then were the foundations for other people to go and take it in other sorts of directions, weren't they?
Yeah, I guess to follow on from the other great people who've been on this podcast, you know, I definitely was lucky in terms of timing of getting involved at Bolton Wanderers. Great leadership there in terms of Big Sam, and then of course then the team around him with people like Mike Ford. So yeah, it was just a great time to be young and involved in sport. It was my first time working as a full-time professional in sport. I'd been at Blackburn Rovers before that in a community programme, and then I'd gone off to university to Liverpool John Moores, and just being able to then walk into that environment. I'd done a bit of coaching with the under 9s and 10s, and in the second year of my university degree, I had to go and do a placement. So I spent the first week at Bolton with the medical sports science team, which was great. And then the second week I met Dave Fallows and Matt Hockin that were doing the analysis at the time, and was just blown away by it. I didn't even know this was an industry, you know, using data and video to work with the coaches and the players to influence decision making. So it was really at the, I guess, embryonic stage then. So it was more about just going in there and trying to share some ideas. I mean, I got my first job because I could make a DVD. Basically, it was like the first thing that got me into the game. And we were still working on VHSs back then, so to go from VHS to DVD was a big step back then.
But football was always the passion ahead of data. I mean, that may have been superseded now, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, my journey up until that point is like a lot of people failed to make it as a full-time professional player, although got close to getting what was a YTS back then. Cried in my bedroom for 3 or 4 days after that. I was very disappointed. My father had been a player, so thought I was letting him down by not following in his path. But he very quickly helped pick me up and say, well, that's not the only role you can have in sport and in football. So kind of dust yourself down and look what's next. And that led me down into more of a coaching pathway to start with, because I thought that was the natural next step. And I enjoyed that. I did my first C license, as it was back then when I was 16 years old. It was the youngest you could be to get the qualification. So I was always curious about the game and trying to learn about the inconsistencies within there. Learn about the detail of the game and how the game works, and then trying to find other ways of applying it. Like I say, but at that time when I discovered what Matt and Dave was doing, it was literally by chance. But up until that point, I've been learning about the game and trying to apply that in a more practical setting. So being able to do that at Bolton just became a great opportunity, really. And Sam and Mike Ford as well, the performance director, were just so amazing at encouraging people to share ideas. So I would have been a 18, 19-year-old lad back then, and Big Sam would be as generous with his time and take on board your suggestions regardless of your age and your experience. He'd literally tell you if your idea was good or rubbish. And as a young, impressionable person but still learning my craft, it was amazing to work with a leader like that. And I really owe a lot to that initial stage there of just being able to work out quickly what's a good idea and what's a bad idea through like what you're trying to suggest and what you're seeing. But having a leader like that who would take advice from a 18-year-old lad who knows like literally next to nothing at that time, and then try and implement it. Some of the things we did was amazing, and there was lots of fellow colleagues at Bolton were like that. For most of us, we were young. It was our first ever job in professional football, and it was about kind of going on this journey and just seeing where it took us, but having some great leadership there with Sam and Mike.
But that's the amazing thing, you drop a stone in the water and the ripple just goes. The last 20 years, that ripple's gone all the way through, not just professional football and Premier League elite football, it's gone right through sport.
Yes.
Those people in that unmarked door at that former training ground that was once a village hall, I mean, that was a proper engine room of people.
Yeah.
You walked in there and there was a buzz.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we had some real basics down as well, and I still don't see this very much today. Is like, for example, every week all the first team football staff would get together and we call it the war room that Mike had created. It was a circular table, so everyone was seen as equal. There was no head of table, for example. And there was a simple agenda. Each department went around the room and gave a quick update on what's happened in the last 7 days and what they think is going to happen in the next 7 days that they feel that other people should be made available. It was a maybe 1.5 hour meeting tops. We really drilled into us about keeping it short and sharp. Sam was great because he protected that time in terms of training and stuff, so we would delay training so that it could happen. And then every 2 weeks, the same would happen with all the academy staff. So every academy department was represented and all the first teams, so everyone, then the war room was really full. And just that regularity of connection and contact was just so powerful because you really felt like you were on the same page, like what was going forward. And if you spotted something that was related to another department, medical, sports science, or what we were doing in nutrition or with psychology or whatever that might have been, back then, you could start to connect the dots. So even though you weren't in that department, you could say, I know that so-and-so is doing this, let's kind of connect that. Or I've seen player X doing this that we were talking about in that meeting. Okay, we'll just, on a QT, just relay that information back. And I think that was the real basic things. And I still don't see that happening a lot at clubs today because people get kind of carried away, I guess, with the pressure and the day-to-day of the environment. But even when, arguably went on to Manchester City and obviously City Football Group and had far more success in terms of trophies, still in those early days when I first joined City, it was a real culture shock, really, because there wasn't a high-performance environment at all when we first joined in 2008. And that was a real shock, really, because the team was actually performing higher than Bolton at the time, but actually a lot of the infrastructure and things just wasn't in place.
But I thought the amazing thing back then, and it wasn't called pastoral care, but it was pastoral care of people, not only the players, I mean ostensibly the players because they were the most important thing, they're the ones that are going to get you the results on the pitch, but people were treated like human beings in that football club, and you don't see that as part and parcel of every club.
No. And again, I think it plays into the leadership of Sam and Mike and others that really created that understood that a lot of the staff were very young and it was their first roles and didn't have any necessarily ties to families, we didn't have kids and stuff like that back then. So we could dedicate our time to helping the team achieve its goals. So we had some very clear mission statements and goals we were trying to achieve and achieve success within our context. Like we weren't talking about winning the league or anything, and obviously we didn't, but to qualify for Europe was a big challenge for us, and to do that for the first time in the club's history was amazing to be part of. What a great time. And the celebration that came after that, you felt that you earned it because you'd been really part of the fabric. And there was moment in times at City where we won trophies, and definitely in one of those wins, I didn't feel as part of it. Like that had really played a part in it. And on the outside, people would say, "Oh gosh, won a trophy, part of a Premier League winning title. That was amazing." Yes, but actually, the second one I felt way more involved with than the first one. So I think it does matter about how the entire high performance department is used and get the most out of. And every leader is slightly different in terms of the way that they want to do that. So that's taught me a lot. And now in this role as a director at Hudl and the leadership experience I've had at Bolton, City and now at Hudl has really has helped me there to kind of learn from others and hopefully reflect that in the work I do today with the great team that I lead. I
know with Big Sam it frustrates him that he's kind of put in a pigeonhole as being a certain manager. And I also know that the people who work with him share his frustration that he's not what people perceive him to be, is he?
No, he's super intelligent, very to the point in terms of decision making, will take on board advice and information from around him. He's a very good filter of information, I would say, in terms of making the decisions he makes, but also knows when to dial it up and be firm, particularly with staff and players as and when needed. So sets very, very high standards, demands a lot from the people around him. But I think because he's got that ability to connect with you as a person, you ultimately get to this place where you feel like you want to run through a brick wall for him. I think for any leader, if you ever have that feeling and you're working with a leader where you want to run through a brick wall for them, I think that's that's a good testament that they're a good person. And so I certainly felt like that with Sam and other coaches that I work with and other leaders. But certainly Sam was the first where I really felt that way. Like I would have literally done anything. And my wife jokes with me very, very often that I led her under false pretenses when we first got together. I said, "Oh, I've got a normal job, 9 to 5." And after 2 weeks of coming in at 3 or 4 in the morning because I was still working on the video and getting ready for the next meeting the next day, she was like, this isn't normal, like what you're doing in terms of that type of thing. But I think that was because I just felt a sense of duty, of honour, that I had to see through this information because Sam was literally going to use it, or someone was going to use it the next day with the players. So yeah, back then the technology wasn't as efficient as it is now, so you had to do a lot more work and wait for things and do a lot more editing and stuff to get where you wanted it to be. So I felt that was just part of earning new stripes, as they say. Yeah.
But running through brick walls is kind of a British thing. How do you get some of those superstars that weren't from here, the likes of Anelka, Okocha, Djorkaeff, Campo, the list goes on, to run through those brick walls and believe the same things that you're talking about so passionately? Because they did.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the heart of that was really tapping into where they were on their careers. So each of them, if you look at where they were at the time when they joined Bolton, it was probably starting to decline in terms of their recognition in the industry, and people starting to question them, etc. And I think we gave them the opportunity, and certainly that was the message that Sam would have lent into, is we can help provide you an excellent high performance environment so you can be the best version of yourself you can be, whether that's medical, sports science, psychology, off the field, on the field, whatever that might be. We've built a high performance team to truly help you with a good environment as well that had been invested in. Eddie Davis and the ownership, etc., had done some great work in terms of investing in the facilities as well. Although modest compared to today's standards, but still.
I think you had the first cryo chamber, didn't you?
Yeah, first cryotherapy chamber. Yeah. We used to have the air imported from Poland, and it was costing a fortune every month to bring it over. Yeah, so yeah, it was. But that again, they came off the back of practical experiments. So that we did experiments during pre-season, made them academically sound and valid. And use that to present back to the owner and board about why we felt that this was a good decision. So it wasn't just get a cryo because we felt it was a good idea. It was let's put some scientific rigor to this and then come back to it. But kind of going back to your point around the players, I think it was leaning into okay, we can help you, almost revive your career in some cases. So with someone like Yuri Djorkaeff, I think that was definitely the case. And all the way through to Elijah Diouf and Nicholas Anelka. I think the one with Nico was pretty cool because I was part of the party that went out to Paris to meet with him and his representatives where we were trying to sign him, and we really did our homework. And one of the things we created, and this was kind of by Dave Fallows, who's obviously now doing a great job at Liverpool, was to create what we called a recruitment DVD. It's not obviously wouldn't be a DVD anymore, but basically it was just trying to tell the journey of how we're going to support you in all areas, not just the on the field stuff. What are the local schools? What's the tax rules like? What's the things like for your children? What's the housing like? How can we help you in terms of understanding the culture if you don't already know it? Really an holistic approach to what it is to the decision you're going to make. And with Nico, we also kind of looked at his change to Islam in terms of from a religious conversion perspective, and his particular dietary needs that he would need. And we made that part of the presentation. We'll make sure that all the food we deliver for you is halal, and we understand it's going to be specially treated. And we've checked this with the catering team at the training ground, and they're more than delighted to kind of meet your needs. And you could see he was like, no one's ever said that before. Really thought about me as a person like that. So I think that's where we won a lot of signings, was just because of that more holistic approach to the individual, to the person. And again, you win some and lose some along the way. One of the other things we introduced, which didn't last very long, was to do some psychological profiling on players that we're going to sign. Again, most of them, because we were coming from that kind of journey, we wanted to just double check that we could map them up against our current squad and try and understand, within a bubble a little bit, I suppose, how they may fit into the team. Once I suppose agents and things got a wind of it, they were less keen to allow their players to be done. Plus, there's some challenging around the scientific rigor of doing it under pressure when you're in a moment like that. But initially, it was good, and it helped us. I think it was helped part of the process. Trying to be innovative, I guess, was the thing. Just try and say, well, what's the challenge we're facing? you don't necessarily know what the players are going to be like until you get them in the building. What could we do to try and understand that a little better? So it's just part of the things that we tried along the way. So I guess it's just a one example of how we were just trying to be innovative and different, and not always necessarily spending a lot of money to do that. It was like, within your means, how can you be creative to overcome the problems that we face?
It's funny because on the pitch, I thought the motivation was, let's prove we're not Little Bolton, that we can uproot trees no matter where we look. And I got the impression also that it was the same in the backroom staff and in the analytics staff. Let's be doing things that no one else is doing.
Yeah. I think probably out of necessity as well there, James. It was a bit like, we wanted to prove ourselves, but we also knew that we couldn't just go and spend big like the big teams were doing, etc. We had to do something different. So again, because we were young and didn't know better, we thought we could try a lot of things and just see what worked out. But most of us had come from a scientific education background, through formal education. So I think that underpinning helped us be a bit more rational about the ideas we were coming up with. And then working with the staff, with the coaching staff, and with the players ultimately, and trying to influence the decisions that we're making. Things like Sam wanted to be heard better during training. The wind at Bolton sometimes was crazy, so okay, we'll mic you up and we'll put speakers around the pitch, and we'll increase the chances that the players are going to hear what you're saying. Let's put it like that. And that was great, and also became quite fun as well, because he loved shouting at the players every now and again about certain things, and just those things were different. Just trying to think outside the box about how could we solve some of these challenges that we faced in terms of ensuring that the players understood what we were doing, and the direction we were taking, and their role in it. Ultimately, they were the most important of the lot. So I think there was a real genuine sense, and it should be true today of any high performance environment, is that you're there to support ultimately the decisions that the players are going to make. Take them as far as possible and support them, and then ultimately it's down to them on the field. In terms of the decisions they make, and you hope that at that point all the staff around them have helped them up until that point.
But I imagine when you look back and you see how things have changed, certainly in the technology realm governing sport, do you still look back and think, blimey, we were cutting edge and we were doing stuff that we should never have been doing? Yeah,
but it's also like at the time, and this will happen with everyone who's working in a high performance environment, you get blinkered about what you're doing. But I just felt that was normal. We were just doing normal things. But it's only when you get the benefit of hindsight and you travel around and you see other things, you think, oof, no, actually, we were actually doing some pretty cool stuff back then. And arguably I've made the rest of my career off the back of that, just being able to just be curious and just try and help people, and just try and spot things that could improve, or suggest changes that could be done differently. So it did feel like that. I mean, a lot of amazing people that we were working together with at Bolton back then, and I think the same is true been throughout my career. I think it's ultimately down to the role you play within a bigger team environment, and if you're lucky enough to work with great people, you will often achieve amazing things. Like I say, qualified for Europe in the first time in the club's history, and then repeating that again. So we qualified 2 times before I left in 2008. That was just an amazing experience to be part of, and I know it made the people at Bolton very proud, the things we were doing, and it was just great to be part of that. But like you say, also I've just kind of mentioned that you kind of also didn't know any better. That's all I knew at that time. It's only a benefit in hindsight. You do think, gosh, we were doing some pretty cool stuff back there.
But the testimony to that is where people have gone. You mentioned Dave Fallows, a load of people, and the sign above our door says VSI Sporting Directors Podcast. Well, Mike Ford was perhaps one of the first sporting directors, not by name, but by position and what he was doing in British football.
Yeah, Mike's brilliant. I can't speak highly enough of him and how he made everyone feel, and really on a regular basis was just trying to keep the cohesion between the departments and the players as optimal as it could be.
Which is what a sporting director should do, isn't it?
Yeah, it should be. It's that having that finger on the pulse of what's going on. But also Mike was awesome at just like letting you run with things. If he could see that you were good at what you did, and maybe give you a bit of a direction and stuff, but he just like let you run. And often then it was like coming back to him, we actually reached a blocker or something, coming back to him and getting his advice on how you could overcome that. Or often in the build up to big games, we were doing things like making motivational type videos and movies, and we tried to get very creative with that, within the realms of what we could afford to do. And he was a great sounding board to bounce some ideas off of the things that we would put together for the players, and try and really think about the messaging that was in those to kind of again get the players motivated, and keep the kind of momentum going. So yeah, around some really big games we would do that on quite a regular basis. And again, Sam was awesome with stuff like that. He'd really let us go to town. We present it to him, and often he would say, "Yeah, this is great," and then he would build it into his speech in the build up to the game, either the day before or very often in the dressing room, literally just before they're about to go out. So it was great to be part of stuff like that. That was you knew was having an impact, and senior leaders were valuing it.
But there's also a structure on the pitch and off it. You go to some clubs and there are a lot of busy fools, people rushing around saying how busy I am and yet not doing anything. I think at Bolton, everyone knew their roles and responsibilities, didn't they?
Yeah, again, another thing from Mike really is to very, very clear job descriptions and a very clear process with the HR team in terms of how regularly we were doing performance check-ins and reviews, things that are obviously more common now. But that was great to, again, I didn't know any better at the time, but it was great to, in hindsight, to be part of that, because you felt like your own personal needs were being looked after as much as they could afford to do. It was great to be part of, to have that moment where you were being looked at as an individual within the team context. So yeah, everyone felt like they had the place, and I get a lot of he said today about the concept of psychological safety. I think Bolton at the time when it was good, before Sam left, that was in hindsight is probably the most psychological safe I've felt whilst being in a club environment. I've got to say at Hudl now today, it's incredible the support we get. But but from a club environment, I definitely felt the most safe there at Bolton, because you literally could challenge each other, and it wasn't all rainbows and sunshine, etc. We did have tough times, and we didn't always agree with each other. But I think we had that safety net to say, okay, well, bottom line is we're still all going in the same direction. So that really helped. I think it really helped when we were trying to hire staff as well, other staff to come into the environment. I think they felt clearer about what it is that was expected from them. And I think we made it very clear if they weren't doing what we expected them to do. Especially as, personally, as I became more experienced and more confident, and I guess a little bit more senior within the team, you start to then see and spot these things. And then living through the Big Sam leaving, that was a difficult time.
Yeah, I mean, how difficult was that? Bearing in mind, it's where you cut your teeth. Everyone was kind of tapped into what Bolton meant, and part of that was Big Sam. All of you signed up to that.
Yes.
So suddenly he leaves. How difficult was that decision to stay and not follow him? Because a lot of people did.
Yeah, a lot of people followed. Me personally, my father was academy director at the time, and also my wife's mother was very ill and unfortunately passed away not long after he left. So it just wasn't the right time to consider a move. And equally, I don't know. I never even had the conversation whether he would have wanted me to go with him or not. But yeah, either way. What it was a great lesson in was that when a real senior leader leaves, like Sam, and a lot of people leave too, is the vacuum of knowledge that leaves as well, or creates. A lot of great people left with knowledge of how we were doing things. And in no disrespect to the people that came in afterwards, I think we're all a product of bringing in things of our own experiences. So because there was such a high turnover of staff, everyone came in with their own experiences, and there was no central place of reference around what good looks like, what we've been doing as standards, what we've been talking to the players about.
Is that scary when that happens?
Yeah, very, very scary to be in the middle of it when you've been part of the other side of that. And I was really conscious not to keep going, oh, well, it was better back then, it was better back then. I mean, you didn't want to be a broken record like that. And I don't know if I necessarily got that right or wrong, but that's certainly what I was feeling. And when Gary Megson came in, to refer to him, past Sammy and being the head coach, Gary did one of the things that I've probably respected the most of any coach who's come into an organisation. He got all the staff together and he said, I understand, you've had your highs and your lows here at the club. I'd like you to write me a letter. And I'd like you to write me a letter and tell me what's working well and what isn't working well. And you can make it anonymous, don't have to put your name on it. By the end of the week, just if you could either email it through or via somebody else, or just write it down and put it on a tray here, and we'll keep it all confidential. So at that time, I needed that. I needed to offload onto someone about what had gone on, and what was happening now. So I wrote a letter, and at the point I was about to hand it in, I thought, I'm going to put my name on this. So I wrote my name on it, Ed Sulley, and I handed it in. And about 3 days later, I had a knock on the door, and it was Gary. Can you come into my office? I was like, here we go. I'm going to get sacked here. So I walked into his office and sat me down. He said, yeah, I've got your letter. Thanks for putting this together. He said, this is actually one of the best things I've ever read in terms of how honest you've been about it. And I can appreciate how difficult it's been for you to write something of this detail. Can you help me be part of the solution here? Like, what can we put in place? And that was just amazing to get that from a leader in Gary's, to be humble and open about that. At the same time, he was really coming into a firefighting situation, like from a performance perspective, like we needed wins back yesterday. So for him to take that time out and read all those letters and then try and put things in place, I really respected that. And it, in part, it made me want to stay a little longer. So I probably stayed longer at Bolton than I probably would have done, because of that. And he really tried to make me part of the, his leadership team around the team then. So we didn't get quite back to the same levels, but it was just great to have that opportunity to put across why it was so different. And like I say, most of it was down to that vacuum of knowledge. And ultimately then the flip side of that of trying to build that at City Football Group, from 2014 onwards. I joined in 2008, but by 2014 we'd gone multi-club ownership with Brian Marwood leading that team. His team is designed to be the opposite of what we didn't have at Bolton. It's to be that central knowledge, so that as change has happened, you can mitigate those risks so much easier.
I want to kind of fast forward. It's a giant risk here, because linear is good and people are comfortable with linear. But so I'll take a risk. We talked about risks already. So I want to go all the way to Hudl in 2019 and park the kind of linear thing.
Yeah.
We'll do Man City in a bit.
Sure.
Different prisms, different visions, seeing things through different eyes. When you've been part of a multi-club group, how do you perceive it being out of it? Is it a healthy way for football to be? Is it the way that football is going to go? I mean, bearing in mind, I think you had 7 clubs at Man City when you were there, and now it's 13.
Yeah.
And I think they've got an ambition to have more.
Yes, no doubt. Yeah, I think from a sustainability perspective, I think it's a good idea. Those that are taking it seriously. I've continued to track and monitor who multi-club ownership groups around the world. There's well over 100 now across sports. So over 300 teams, sports teams.
It's about 6,500 players, isn't it?
Yeah, that are included within a multi-club ownership group. Again, having been part of the inner sanctum, I guess, of those approaches at City, I think I would definitely say it's a good thing. It's good at helping to centralise knowledge, to share ideas across the teams, to look at pathway of players in a more unique way. And I think that's what if you look at FIFA's study that they did on kind of youth development. I think they came up with the tagline of give every player a chance. Well, I think a multi-club ownership group is a good way, when it's run well, is to actually maximise that, to give every young player a good chance of being a professional. It's very hard to do if you're a singular club, because everything outside of your club is very much out of your control. Even the loan pathway pieces are out of your control. And I think multi-club ownership in that part, I guess, has become a bit of a necessity for people as well, to think about, if we're developing talent, not everyone can play senior football, but if we can do that through leveraging multi-club ownership legislations, then yeah, I think that's a good thing. And again, I think a lot of the multi-club ownership groups are doing a great job at pushing the industry forward in terms of innovations, in terms of development, in terms of sharing of knowledge. So yeah, at Hudl we have a great pleasure to work with most multi-club ownership groups around the world in some way, shape, or form. So it gives us a unique insight into where the industry is going.
Is there less suspicion or more suspicion when it comes to data and doing things? You talked about a sharing thing there. Within groups, obviously people share. But... Yeah.
Again, I think when you're going through the early stages of the multi-club ownership group like we were at City, initially there's a bit of reservation. It's about, are you coming in here as the police? Are you're auditing us? What's going on here? I think we made it a very conscious effort, and I certainly personally did, was to try and break those barriers down and connect to the human beings that you're dealing with. And often what I found is people had great ideas, maybe just didn't have the support that they were needed, Or conversely, sometimes the people who got to a point where it was the right move for them to move on from the organisation. But the vast majority of people that I met during the City Football Group piece, particularly in those early parts where you're doing the initial assessments on the teams, which was one of the roles that I had, going around all the departments and essentially interviewing like we're doing now, one-to-one with people, and just trying to really understand what's going on, and what their aspirations are for the team as well, and then trying to work out how we could support them. I think that in the vast majority of people were happy that this additional investment was coming in. And I think that's what the City Football Group have been great at, is following through on that promise of investment. Have their ups and downs along the way, of course, because it's not a perfect model, but to put the money where the mouth is and follow that through, and also really think about the individuals involved and try and show that you can occurring. And I think multi years on now, more than a decade on, I think they're in probably the strongest place they've ever been in that regard. They'll have much more collaboration between the teams than they've ever had, and I think that's a good example. But they're not the only good multi-club ownership group doing that. I think I admire Red Bull a lot as well in terms of what they do. Very similar in terms of central methodology, sharing that with the teams, but it's still allowing the spaces for the teams to be innovative and creative. And so there's more multiple ownership groups that are doing it well, and that's what's been great about being at Hudl, being able to explore and learn and see the world more, beyond the amazing opportunity that the City Football Group has. But still, you are slightly limited in terms of your reach. Though even within the group, as big as it is, being able to take a step back and now be in the position I am, I feel more humble, more blessed that you can see a lot more of what's going on in the football industry.
It's going to be interesting though to see what FIFA and UEFA decide to do with multi-club, because it's kind of gone way past their rules and their governance at the moment, isn't it? When you think about the scale, we talked about the number of clubs there, and this kind of anti-competition rules. Something's got to be done about it, hasn't it?
I think so. I suspect it'll be incremental change rather than systemic, because just of how big multi-club ownership groups are now and how many teams are involved in that. So you'd be potentially talking about upsetting the finances of a lot of clubs if you've truly brought in some really strict rules. But yes, I think there's rules for the right reasons would need to be implemented, and certainly the distribution of how you move players between clubs, I guess that would be a natural one that would be tightened up. But yeah, I think it's been part of the last decade of growth in terms of sports general, but definitely football. I think it will still continue to grow if you start to kind of project out the numbers that the CIS Football Observatory and others put out there in terms of multi-club ownership. That it could grow to quite a significant numbers of teams. Yeah,
I think it's funny. We hold everything dear to football and say that what we do is right and everything, and we're passionate about our game. Going to somewhere like Hudl and seeing all the variety of sports, bearing in mind, of course, it started in the US.
Yes.
Has it been an eye-opener to see that other people do things differently and sometimes better?
Yeah, I think this is another great lesson of being part of Hudl, that we will support more than 35 sports around the world. There's probably a core of 6 or 7 that we really focus our attention on, often because that's where most of the revenues are generated, but that includes football. I'm really proud to lead a team of 19 people in a bigger organisation of over 4,000 people now in 19 different countries around the world. So very culturally rich and diverse, and regularly speaking to lots of different sports teams around the world across all different levels, from grassroots to the highest ends of the game, in those sports, and also the different personas that are in their different roles, so including sporting directors. So it's great to I have a bi-weekly with my team, and we're all based remotely, so we all have to jump on Zoom and do it that way. But it's just great to bounce off the ideas and the stories about what's going on, what we're seeing around the world, and use that as a guidance in terms of where we influence the product team. Our amazing product team at Hudl do a fantastic job, and kind of just sharing ideas with them about the things we're seeing, or helping to suggest some ideas about what we should be developing to help this next future generation of where the industry is going. I think that's one of the most amazing parts of the job, really, is just meeting with people on a regular basis in terms of clubs, federations, agencies, whatever that might be, and then condensing that information into something that you can put into action internally in terms of, okay, that's influenced the way, future of what recruitment will look like, or the future of analysis will look like, or whatever that might be, the future of human performance, whatever that might be, that's all part of our remit, and it's really exciting.
But it's funny, isn't it? Because I think the whole thing with Hudl started with 3 friends in Nebraska filming college games.
Yes.
So that's streaming, and that kind of exploded, if you like.
Yes.
But it seems now, reading through everything that you're doing, it's kind of more developmental, it's more educational. It's a lot more than just streaming football matches.
Yeah, I mean, at the heart of it, we're a SaaS company, so selling software as a service is our core, is important for us. But I think there's been a recognition by the ownership, by the leadership, and by the broader leadership at Hudl, is that only goes so far. You could, just selling a piece of software to someone can only get you so far. I think if we all think about the more meaningful ways that technology can help, often it comes with some kind of added support, around the why are we doing this and going on a journey. And that's certainly something that the team that I'm leading and very proud to do is seen as like the custodians of that within Hudl, is to be the custodians of the knowledge of the why. Like, why are people working the way they are? And we link this back to again from the lessons of being in the high performance world. We call it the high performance workflows. So what are the high performance workflows for recruitment, for team performance, and for human performance? And then where does our technology fit within that? And because we've got that clarity of purpose, it helps us internally critique and understand where we're going, and then externally go to our customers and help them all on the journey, because we can understand and empathise and connect to the journey that they are going on. And everyone in the industry is at a different career level. They're either starting out or they've been there for decades. And I think we've got solutions and connections that we can make right across the board there. So it's great. It's a great environment to be part of, and the founders are brilliant at Hudl, and through the pandemic they were absolutely amazing in terms of protecting jobs and calming everyone down and creating space for us to continue to be creative, even though at the time it was a very difficult time.
But much like going back to Big Sam and Bolton, everything comes down to a game model. Whether it's football, whether it's American football, whether it's hockey, baseball, whatever, and then bolting everything else around it there. I mean, you talked about recruitment. That's clearly a massive facet of it.
Yeah.
But at the heart of it is the game model, isn't it?
Yeah. But Bolton was definitely my first kind of experience of that. But it went to a whole new level at City Football Group, for sure. And certainly, I joined in 2008, and in 2009, Brian Marwood joined, and he brought this concept of the one house of football. And that basically was all the departments kind of working together, very similar to what we had in place at Bolton, just kind of termed slightly differently, I guess. And being at the core of that was like how we wanted to play the game. And he would often say at the time, like, close your eyes and think about, okay, you want to imagine Man United, I want you to imagine Barcelona, I want you to imagine Bayern Munich. Tell me how they play, and you could quite easily say, okay, this is how they play. Okay, do the same now, but describe Man City. Don't know. Like, that was the reality of where we were back then, 2009. So you said that's the thing we've got to go after. We've got to, in a decade on, we've got when people close their eyes and they think Man City, they can very clearly describe the way that team plays. Now, the difference between Bolton and the way we played and the different we played at City were vastly different. One was a bit more pragmatic, maybe a little bit more direct, and at least until we got to the attacking third, and then we got creative. Where at City, we were going much more possession based. That we felt that was the way to go. And then obviously in 2012, Chicky Brigilstein joined, and again brought all that experience of working at that with Barcelona, and again a real purist around football and the way he believed it should be played. But at the same time, and this is what I love about Chicky as a person, he's humble enough to know and say that isn't the only way of playing the game. Like, there's loads of ways you can play the game. There's loads of ways you can be successful and win trophies. It's just we're choosing to play this way because we believe it's the most entertaining, the most enjoyable, and that's just our beliefs. And that's what we're building it on. And that was great to be part of that and have those key leaders that were really putting the game first, the way we want to play the game first, then build all the other departments around it. So again, you felt like you had clarity of purpose then. Like, we're trying to help the team play this way. How can we as an analyst team, which I was at the time, what part can we play? Same with the medical staff, same with sports science staff, recruitment staff. What role can you play to help us achieve this? And it just became so much clearer. So It's often when I talk about when, in now my Hudl hat on when I'm speaking with people, is to really understand how clear that game model is. Can you describe it? Do you have it captured somewhere? Is it well understood by the players and the staff? How do you educate them on that? When there's churn of people, how do you educate them on that? How fundamental is that to you? And often that can be the start of then the work that we would do. Is often, we're doing it really well, but we're not doing it quite so well. So, what advice could you give it? So that tends to be, very much a foundational part of the conversation that we'll have with our customers at Hudl, is that trying to work that out. But that's quite specific to football, really. Not all the other sports really lean into that concept per se of having a true game model identity to play. Rugby, more rugby coaches would see it that way. But I think in football that's changed a lot over the last decade. Certainly, what I've observed is far more centralisation of methodology. And some of that from a corporate perspective is more from a sustainability perspective too, because if you think about every time you change your game model, if you change from, let's just say, two extremes, a counter-attack style to a possession-based style, you're going to need different players to play those games. And if you are changing then your coach every couple of years between those two polar opposites, what happens is you end up with a legacy of decisions around the playing squad, and it handcuffs your ability to then evolve the squad and move them on, because you can't just move the players on. They've obviously got contractual obligations and stuff. So the players that you bought to play counter-attacking style, now you've swapped to a more possession-based style. It's not necessarily going to be an instant payoff. And this is what's impressive about people like Ange. I've had the pleasure of working with when he was at Yokohama Marinos as part of the group. Ange Postecoglou is obviously doing a great job at Tottenham, and he's good at doing that in a very short space of time, actually, moving from one style to another and deploying that. So there are coaches that can do that very well, but it is difficult to get the players to believe in a new way of playing. I mean, that's ultimately what you're trying to do, isn't it? The players have to believe in the way you want to play the game. Otherwise, you're really struggling, because everything else, as good as everything else is after that, if the players don't believe, then you've got no chance.
So let's open the door on Man City then. People will be watching this or listening to this and thinking, blimey, he just jumped on board when the life was good. You took a hell of a risk leaving Bolton at the time you did, because it was pre Sheikh Mansour. It was pre the City group.
Yes, a month or two before Sheikh Mansour and the Abu Dhabi United group took over, and I had no idea that was going to happen at the time.
And things weren't great at City then, were they?
No. In 2008 when I joined, Simon Wilson had approached me and a few others that had been at City, at Bolton actually, Dave Fallows and Gavin Flegg, and sold us this dream essentially of we're trying to change the team, and obviously there's a lot of investment has been coming in at the time, and we're trying to build out a better department, particularly around scouting and analysis. So the role I was going into was head of post-match analysis. So that was the title, but the environment I left at Bolton is as though we were on decline in terms of performance. The actual environment was still top quality. The training ground was still great. Was still fit for purpose. Like I say, I had a cryotherapy and things like that in there. Going to City was a massive culture shock, and I guess in a way, I think Mark Hughes also said this when he joined. If he'd have seen the training ground before he'd agreed to join, he probably wouldn't have joined Man City, because it was that bad. The training ground was shocking. Did you have
regrets when you first went there? Did you think, have I done the right thing here?
Yeah, almost immediately. And we'd literally just stayed up at Bolton. It was like, tried to make sure I stayed to the end of the season, and I think it was Sunderland that we beat in the last game of the season. I might be wrong. Maybe it was Middlesbrough. Anyway, we won the last game of the season, and it kind of secured our fate, and we stayed in the league. So after that, I had agreed to join and jumped across. And in that first week, I was like, "What have I done? Like, this is the worst decision I've ever made." I have a real anxiety about it. Like, really, just the environment was terrible. A lot of the people, and again, I guess it's part of any company that's been through a lot of change over a short space of time. There was a lot of people there that just didn't even see or recognise what high performance was. They were just waiting for change. They'd seen so many coaches change in the last years that they were just, Mark was coming in as a new head coach, and a lot of them were thinking, he'll be gone in 6 months. We'll be on to another coach. I mean, that was literally the mentality. So to walk into that at Bolton, it was very seldom you'd find someone who thought that way, and quite quickly they would be moved out, if you hired new staff and they didn't quite fit or whatever. Whereas there was a lot of people like that at City walking into it, and I was like, what do I do? Do I just adapt and be one of the crew, or do I stick to my principles and stick to what I believe is right? And I did the latter, but those initial weeks were difficult. Going on pre-season, and you could just tell this performance staff was not gelling; it wasn't together. Thankfully, we came through that, and the rest is history. But that initial stage was very difficult. And I know Simon probably felt a little guilty at the time in terms of getting us into the environment and stuff.
The false pretenses.
Yeah, but I think ultimately he knew that we needed to get good people in, and hopefully I was seen as that. But to get good, better people in, you maybe just had to pull the wool over our eyes a little bit and sell them the dream of the future. But then when the Abu Dhabi United group takeover happened, that was just, what a time to be part of that.
I imagine it felt like someone just turned the taps on, didn't it?
Yeah, it was. It almost felt limitless at the initial couple of months of that. It was literally like, what do you need? We'll fund you with whatever it is. You just tell us. And it was like, well, anything? It's like, yeah, anything, you tell us. So one of the things we identified quite quickly was the gym was terrible. So they brought John Stemp in to help kind of pull that together, who's just an amazing person.
He gets a mention on the podcast quite a lot.
Yeah, I've seen that in the previous episode. John is an amazing person and super, super talented.
He just gets things done, doesn't he?
Yeah, really gets things done, and built a state-of-the-art gym in the rest of the training ground that was very substandard in 10 days. So during an international break, he put together this amazing team, dropped in. And for the rest of the environment, it just set the tone about what the future could be. He's like, listen, we can do this in 10 days. What could we do in another 10 days, another 20 or 30? Like everyone started to go, gosh, yeah, this is serious. We're going to be part of something special here. So I think that in itself just started to help overcome. And, it was a facility at the end of the day, but it was just a statement of intent about what the future could look like. And you could start to see that change in people's minds. Okay, well, maybe this is a long-term thing. It isn't just a fly-by-night investment and, in and out type of thing. So, I mean, the Abu Dhabi United group have been amazing, and Khaldoon Mubarak and Sheikh Mansour have just been incredible leaders of that organisation and very humble people as well. I really enjoyed working with people like that, people that are humble, even the highest leaders of an organisation, those that are humble and will listen to others and take on board ideas and then act accordingly. I think they're the types of leaders that I gravitate to working towards, and at Hudl it's exactly the same now. All the great leaders I get to work with now, like Sam Lloyd and Tom Fowler and obviously the founders in David Bryan and John too. They're all humble people, and I really enjoy working with that. But they've achieved amazing things in their careers. So if I've got a choice, I often gravitate towards those types of people.
It's funny, back then, obviously being a journalist, it was great because each player would turn up at the Etihad and the fans were there, so we get the shots of the fans, you get the interview at the stadium, and it was great, it was brilliant, It was all exciting. But that was by design rather than chance, wasn't it?
Yeah, we purposely didn't take them to the training ground during the signing process because we were afraid that they were going to say no. Yeah.
That bad?
Yeah, it was that bad, yeah.
So the idea, just to get them to the stadium, show them something, all the bells and whistles,
yes,
and we get them that way.
Yes, which had been built for the Commonwealth Games and not for Man City at the time. So Man City became a custodian of the facility afterwards. So yeah, it was that bad in the early days. But again, post the takeover, the investment that went into that facility, when we left it was in such a better condition than we'd arrived, and that's down to the commitment of the ownership ultimately, and John being able to get things done quicker.
But I imagine also the other exciting bit from your point of view was suddenly you're working with players, the likes of Rubinho, some of the players that came in. Suddenly elite performance is starting to feel a bit more elite now, isn't it?
Yeah, it was. And again, like you said, there was a divide in the non-playing staff, I would say initially, and the same was true of the players. The players were used to change. The coach is going to leave, etc. So I know that was a big challenge for Mark and everyone else involved in that, Mike Rigg, etc. In those early days, just trying to work out the squad and evolve it on. And when Brian came on board, again, if initially in those early days as well, without not being shy of it, probably had to pay way more money than we would have normally had to pay for that type of talent just to get them to come to Man City. I think that was part of the reality of the situation, and ultimately the owners wanted success in a short period of time. Like, we could have taken 40, 50 years to build what Man United or Arsenal or Barcelona or Bayern Munich, etc. All the big teams at the time had created over many decades. But the challenge was, how can we do that in 10? What could we do? Okay, well, some of that is going to have to be, we're going to have to invest in a certain type of player to get us on this journey. And then once you start to hit success, you can start to change that dynamic a little bit, that paradigm in terms of how the investment is treated. And then by that point, obviously, you've grown your commercial revenue to match, etc. So that was definitely part of the challenge of that, and something that all the staff enjoyed trying to work out. How do we get there in 10 years and not in 50?
One of the bits of my prep, which I was excited about until you mentioned it earlier, was talking about the first title, the Aguero goal and everything like that. But it sounds like it wasn't quite as special as it was.
The day itself was special.
It was complete pantomime, theatre, all those sort of things. But in terms of feeling part of it, that's really interesting that you didn't.
Yeah, I mean,
because we're talking 4 years on.
Yes. The FA Cup was awesome. I think that was an amazing time to be part of that and be at Wembley and win. That was, you did feel part of that game. I think in the build up to the 2012. Roberto, I loved working with Roberto. He was very clear and direct. But in terms of the way he used our team, it was a colleague of mine he used more in terms of pre-matching. Pedro Marques, who's now at Benfica, another amazing person that I had the privilege to work with. He really lent into Pedro and used him a lot. And he wasn't as much in. I was still doing post-match at the time. He wasn't as much into showing post-match stuff, really. And I think that's maybe why I was saying I didn't feel quite as part of it. But then fast forward that on to Manuel. Manuel was the opposite. He was much more post-match orientated and a little bit pre-match. So I felt more involved in the process and involved in his decision making. Again, it's just down to the individual coaches and how they like to work, I suppose. So yeah, you always take a position from where you were at that moment. So yeah, as amazing as Sergio's goal was in the environment and being pitch side, that we all went pitch side like everyone. Like it was that was an amazing time. But actually feeling like I was part of the win, it wasn't as strong as later with Manuel.
Part of journeys that people go through is learning what works, what doesn't work, being out of your comfort zone. So when you have that conversation, we'd like you to look at the other side of the world and build other parts of the group, primarily in Asia.
Yeah.
How did that conversation come about, and how scary was it when data was everything that you kind of had pinned everything to?
Yeah. Well, I guess I've always taken, I heard Simon talk about this too in terms of the earlier podcast. I think data and information, I think, is just like part of trying to make rational decisions. I've always liked logic applied to decisions being made, but also because I've been in and around the sport environment, I understand that's not always the way that it can take place, and not everything can be measured. I think that's really important to stress too. I really believe in a balance between expert practitioners and what information and data can use and support. So it's really getting a balance between the two. You see that happening today in kind of recruitment, for example, how things have evolved and how data and stuff is being used more. The very best organisations get this balance between what the staff can provide, including the scouts, and the data and video, and they really balance it out. The ones that don't quite get it right are extreme one way or the other. They're either still heavily reliant on scouts, or they've gone too far towards data and they're forgetting the role that a great scout and recruiters can take. So I think the really best organisations get a balance. So, but going back to your point, in 2014, Brian was asked to take on board the growth of the group. So moving outside of Manchester and starting to take on board clubs in New York, in Melbourne, and in Yokohama in Japan. I'd just been married in 2014 to Vicky, and we were thinking about what the honeymoon would look like. And Brian called me and said, we'd like you to go out and do an initial assessment on this club Yokohama that we're going to take on board as part of our deal with Nissan. We're going to take a 20% ownership or a minority ownership of of the club in Japan. Like, would you go out there and help us do the assessment? I was like, yeah, I'd love to, but I've literally just got married. Like, what should we do? So they were great. They paid for Vicky and I to go out there. We spent the first week having a bit of a mini honeymoon, and then she flew back, and I stayed there for another couple of weeks with the team there. And yeah, in a environment and culture I didn't know, in a language that I didn't know, and I still barely speak a few words of
So
Japanese
she's thinking,
today.
here we go again, after you saying you have a conventional job, it's going to get worse again.
Yeah, it was said. Vicky was, she's been very patient with me over the years, and really supported me, so I can't thank her enough for that.
But how was it being, I talk about being outside the comfort zone, you don't speak Japanese.
No, yeah, it was crazy, yeah, I was very nervous on the flight out, to think about what the environment was I was going to walk into, how I would be perceived as well, still a relatively young person, and going into this environment that, doing my research in terms of Japanese culture is very hierarchical, often very more elderly, experienced people are leaders and things like that. So to go in as a relatively young person, and be going in there to assess what they're doing and create judgment around how good their performance was. And it was a colleague of mine went out and did the same on the commercial side. So there was two of us, Mark and I. Mark looked after the commercial side and doing the assessment there, and I did the football side. But yeah, it was an amazing experience, because it's such a beautiful country, and amazing people. And as I kind of alluded to earlier in this interview, most people I found wanted to be invested in and do things different and go on a journey and do things better, and probably been used to a lot of change, etc. And probably got caught up in some of the politics sometimes of what happens at clubs. So really the fundamental findings that I came back with was, with the right support, these people could be very successful.
And is it about building baby Manchester Cities, or is it about building clubs that have got their own DNA and that everyone kind of shares the knowledge? Because people say plenty of things about ownership models.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think in the early days when we were doing it from 2014, 15, City Football Group, Man City was all we knew. So it probably did feel like to those other clubs that they were getting, hey, this is what we do at Manchester. And through feedback and through our own reflections, we were quite conscious to try and flip that dynamic. And ultimately what happened is, as those teams got settled in the way we were working, you started to spot really good practice about things they were doing. So Sam Erify, who was leading the human performance side for the group at the time, had spotted in Melbourne City that they were doing this amazing work with the GPS data and how they were analysing that and making it available for the players. And it was better than anyone else was doing in the group, including Man City. So they decided to take that information and bring it back to the group and then share it out to all the teams. So we created a central place there. So, and when we did our study on the impact of travel on performance, we used New York City for that, because they had the biggest changes in terms of time zone, but also travel, the regularity of travel, particularly on flights. So we used them to generate the findings and then take that back out to the rest of the group. So when they were getting ready for pre-seasons and stuff like that, we had empirical evidence we could use to influence commercial decisions around where we should go in pre-season and things like that. So yeah, as time went on, it became more about trying to bounce between the group. But in the early stages, it was you go with what you know, and that was what we'd learned at Man City, I suppose.
And then what takes you forward is relationships. I imagine over the years working with Yokohama, suddenly suspicion melts away, and you start working together as a team.
Yeah, it was great to be part of the changes there, helping to find their next sporting director and head coaches. Did that a couple of times, including Ange Postecoglou joining.
What was it about him that you thought he could do it? Because he'd managed, I think, sort of 5 or 6 clubs before that. Australia, obviously, in a World Cup as well.
Yeah. I think it was the first and foremost, it was a link to the playing style. We were looking for coaches that could play that particular way, but not necessarily in a Man City environment where you've got lots of resources available to you. Who's doing that with less resources available?
Because he's always been a coach that scores tons of goals and also concedes a fair few as well.
Yes, yeah. So he was identified again through a mixture of looking at data in terms of how coaches are playing, as well as a network of contacts. So he was added into the initial long list along with a lot of others. And then we went through quite a methodical process. Whenever we did the recruitment pieces, we kind of described, what state the club was in they were going to walk into, and you have seen this when Simon Wilson spoke in terms of that turnaround state was often some of the bits we used in Yokohama as well. You know, these, or we were accelerating them, etc. So you often use like a stars model for that, and then kind of leaning into that. So this is the point in time where they're at as a club. This is where they're at in terms of their overall kind of direction. They're either in a start-up or they're in a turnaround, etc. They need acceleration. Whatever that is, that's first and foremost. Then it's the playing style. Then it's the going into all the other elements of what you need that coach to be. So we wanted to promote young players there for the first time. The team weren't really doing that prior to that. And yeah, things like that. So we were trying to capture down what what success would look like, and then use that as a criteria to measure the coaches as we were kind of going through the process to make it just a little bit more rigorous in terms of the decision being made. And then Ange blew everyone away on the interview process, and he was selected to be the coach.
And I know that Man City don't look at it as kind of outposts. They try and bring people together as much as they can. Yeah. And it's not bad having a flag that says Pep on it. Yeah. Ange, come and meet Pep. Talk about being a manager.
Yeah, for all the coaches that we brought into the group, often they would do two top types, and this is the same for other senior staff as well. They do two types of orientation. One would be or onboarding. One would be local to where they are. Obviously, that would be the last part. But the first part would be come to CFA, to the City Football Group, and meet all the staff that you're going to interact with, and just get to see it and feel it. So you'd fly them in, and you'd spend usually a week with them. With Angie, it was no different. So when he came in, we set up a bunch of meetings, going all the way through to what you should expect from the culture. So we had our amazing Japanese team on the marketing side. They came in and gave Ange some tips on what it's like to be in Japan, and cultural things you should be aware of. Little tips around that, how you first meet people, what should you do, and how to bow, all these things, all the way through to the more football type elements. So we went and had a really good meeting with Cheeky about his vision, philosophy, and where he's going, and he was great, always great with his time in terms of exchanging ideas with Ange as well. And he'd done his homework on Ange and he knew about him, so he was asking good questions. And then we did the same with Pep in his office, and it was just, again, great. I got to work with a lot of great coaches, and although I didn't spend a daily interaction with Pep, I think the thing about him that kind of impressed me the most, again, he's very gracious with his time, very curious, wants to learn about the person he's talking to, and that him and Ange had a great little conversation. But I did ask him at one point, like, how do you manage your time, Pep? Like, in terms of, like, if you've got 100% of your time, like, what does that look like on a daily basis? And he was saying, I probably spend about 20% of my time on the football side. And Ange and I was like, oh, that seems pretty low. He said, yeah, because I'm spending about 80% of the time just managing the expectations of the players. They all want to play, so I have to put extra effort into managing that. And this is the big thing I noticed about the way he works, and you can see it in good coaches like great coaches like Ange and other coaches that I've had the pleasure of meeting, certainly since my time at Hudl, is those really good ones understand the extra effort that has to go into going one-to-one with the players on a regular basis. So Pep would set it up where he'd have his team manager, it was Mark Bachasha at the time, would be setting up a set of meetings throughout the week with the players, and they'd identify the players they wanted to spend more time with, etc. But most players would get some one-on-one time with Pep during the week, which in itself is a big ask. You've got a 25-man squad, you've got a lot of people to kind of manage through. And then all his coaching staff, so his 6 or 7 coaches plus the analysts, 4 or 5 analysts, a big part of their role was to create video-based databases using SportsCode, which is one of our products at Hudl, and capturing that would be things from training. So they have all the cameras at the training sessions. It would be games. It would be opposition analysis. If there were younger players, it may be plays that they're inspired by. So if it was Lionel Messi, etc., you'd have clips around that. And then that database would be available for Pep to use on a one-to-one. He'd be in his room, a big touch screen there, and you'd bring the players in, and then we'd just talk about the game with them and talk about what he's seen in training or helping manage your expectations. And when he felt it necessary, he'd then bring out the clips and walk them through it and talk them through it. And what you'd notice, the biggest difference when you walked around the environment then in the training ground at Man City, is that I guess earlier maybe that I was there, the game was talked about by the players for sure, but it wasn't a regular thing. It wasn't like all the time, not always talking about the game. Whereas what I noticed when I was walking around the facility when Pepper joined in 2016 onwards, it was the players were talking about the game a lot, like going into the analysis room, seeing the videos, going into the stations, watch the videos themselves, getting the video sent to them so they can look at it, looking at their data much more commonly. And again, I think I linked back to the fact that they knew at some point they're going to go and have a session with Pep, and it wasn't in 3 weeks' time. It was like tomorrow. Like you're going to go and see him, and a lot of them wanted to be better prepared, I guess, in terms of like what they've seen happening in training and in the games and stuff. So I think that in itself, just as from a leader perspective from Pep, was just amazing to see firsthand that he really invested that time in. And he does invest that time in individual one-on-one relationships, and hence goes back to what he was saying. 20% time spent on the football side, but 80% kind of managing the expectations of the great players that he's got.
The other person I want to ask you about very quickly, we must wrap things up soon, is Cheeky. Bearing in mind, as I say, Sporting Directors podcast, I think every podcast we've had, he's been mentioned. Yeah. As a human being in my interactions, he's a very humble man. There's that word humble again.
Yes, he is.
But in terms of the job that he does, he's incredible. That's not just resource.
Yeah, I think naturally he's very trusting of others. When he first joined in 2012, one of the things that he was really pushing for, will sound very specific, but it was definitely related to what I was doing, was making sure that the coaches were using tactical wide angle to make their analysis from, because even back then there was still a lot of broadcast video was used to kind of make your analysis. And for those that don't see that, when you watch a game on TV, that would be the broadcast. We're
telling you what to see.
Yeah, and exactly, yeah. The TV is telling you what to see. The beauty of a tactical wide angle, and you see this when the analysts are using that on Match of the Day, etc. The beauty of the wide angle is you literally see pretty much every play on the field, so you can start to see the more tactical based decisions, and that's often very key to success. So in those early days with Cheeky, we would just get the tactical wide angle and sit together in his office and just talk about the game and just review. And it was just great to have someone here that was so heavily influenced, obviously, by the Barcelona model and Johan Cruyff, etc. And just to hear that firsthand, it was amazing to be in his presence, really. But he's very, very humble with it. But then, like I say, very trusting. Like once he knows that the departments and stuff are set up good around him, he's very trusting to crack on and do your good job. And if you need my help, come and let me know. So you feel very empowered working with Cheeky in that regard. And Brian's very, very similar. I think there's a lot of similarity between Byron Marwood and Cheeky Bergerstein. They're both humble people, both believe in the power of people. Like the people around them have good people to do the job. And it was an honour to just be part of one of those good people, I guess.
So I think the question that's begging to be asked is, why did you get off the merry-go-round when it's going so well? And you know that this is a trajectory where they're going to go and win a treble. They're going to win the Champions League.
Yeah, I mean, it does get to a point where the winning of the trophies isn't the most important thing anymore, as daft as that may sound. It's rewarding, of course it is, but when that becomes a habit, you start to think about, well, what's next? You're just going to become reliant on just winning trophies to feel good all the time. So I was definitely getting to a point in my career where I needed a bigger challenge. I'd come close a couple of times to taking a more senior role at Yokohama in Japan, in terms of more sporting director type role, and for various reasons it hadn't quite worked out, mainly due to timing rather than anything else. So I knew I was ready to take that bigger step into more of kind of directorship. And when Sam Lloyd approached me at Hudl, that essentially what he was offering me to do, create a team almost from scratch, that we were looking to, create a better connection between people like sporting directors and what we're doing at Hudl. And across multiple sports and across an incredible business that's rapidly growing. So although initially I'd said to Sam, I was really delighted. I'd spent 11 years at City Football Group at that time, and I could have easily spent another 11 years. When I went away and reflected on it and spoke about this with Vicky, with my wife, it was like, I'm going to regret not giving this a go. It was literally one of those everyone has these fork in the road moments in your life where you could go one direction or the other. And I just felt, if I didn't go for it and have a go with what we're doing at Hudl, I would always go, well, what if I hadn't have done that? And in hindsight, I'm very glad that I did, because it's given, I think it's made me a better leader, a better appreciation and understanding of what true high performance is, a better appreciation for all the different disciplines that go into making high performance successful, including that outside of the direct control of the team. So we work with a lot of agencies as well at Hudl, so it's been great to learn more about that world and see the similarities in terms of the processes. Like the really good agencies do approach things in a very similar way to the very best clubs as well, in terms of duty of care and analysis and understanding and making decisions based on evidence. I think there's a lot of parallels there. So it's really helped me grow as a leader, and I'm incredibly proud to lead the team that I do at Hudl today. It's a really great feeling to be part of that, although it's all remote. We very seldom get in the same room like we are today. Often everything's very remote. So, but it's great. Technology can be a good bridge in that regard.
We spent the time talking about the last 20 years. I want to make the last question about the next 10 years in terms of challenges. I guess the challenge from your point of view and from Hudl's point of view is providing better information quicker and faster,
yes.
And more vivid.
Yes.
And then throw AI into it.
Yes. Yeah, I think we were right at that kind of starting point of AI becoming more commonplace in everyday life. I think the things that companies like OpenAI and others are doing are amazing. Using the right way, I think, are going to be so powerful. There's a lot more natural language type stuff, and I think this is why it will be successful. The push into kind of large language models, the more natural language type things, I think will really resonate with practitioners, because they just want to ask a question and get an answer, rather than having to go away and know that something's being coded and things like that. So I think that will be a big part of the future, and certainly, like all technology companies, Hudl is investing in that too. We're doing some really cool things at the moment. I'm sure once they make the public realm, people will be very impressed with it. But the core of that is still the basics. Like, we want to make sure there's enough content available for people to use. We want to make sure that the technologies are connected with each other so that they can help the high performance workflows. And then the piece that my team's a custodian of, like I say, those high performance workflows, we need to make sure that the technology continues to help the practitioners use that, and leaders use that in the most efficient possible way. And if we're doing that, then 10 years on, we'll have done something good.
Would the boy that cried in his room for 4 days not being a player be pleased the journey that the person's gone on? Or is there still regrets that you didn't make it? Because I think different people sit in that chair and say different things.
Yeah, I'm very happy with I think it taught me a good lesson. I wasn't good enough to be a footballer ultimately, and I had to deal with that. And it helped me learn quite quickly that you can't just assume something's going to happen because you feel like you want to be a player. In hindsight, I should have worked a hell of a lot harder than I did to become a player. I almost thought it was just going to happen because my dad had been one. Whereas I know everything since I've done because I've made a purposeful, conscious decision to go after improving myself, to learning and to helping others ultimately. So yeah, I think I'm in a lot better place now, and probably my father's more proud of me now than I probably would have been if I had been a player, I suppose.
Good answer. Thank you. Time and honesty and everything. Brilliant. What a journey.
Thank you.
Lovely to see you. Well, that's another incredible journey taken care of. It started at Bolton Wanderers, it went through the Manchester City group, and of course via Yokohama, and it's ended up at Hudl. It'll be interesting to see where Ed Sulley continues now, but what an incredible journey. Keep watching the VSI Sporting Directors podcast. The latest episode is coming up soon on whichever platform you're watching or listening.